Hey guys, welcome back to the Another Excuse podcast, where we chat to founders, creators, and self-starters about how they started and where they are now. Today's guest is Jessa Molyneux, the founder of Her Nation. Her Nation is a network state building representative suites of tools to deal with gender bias in AI. That may sound a bit complicated, but we unpack it all in our conversation. We discuss so many different things like what a network state is, the current gender biases that are occurring in AI, Jessa's entrepreneurial journey, and so much more. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure you will too. Enjoy the show. Hi Jessa, thanks for joining me today. I'm very excited about talking to you, and I'm sure it's going to be very interesting. To get started, can we get a bit of context? Could you tell us about yourself and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah. So, God, that's a big question. I've been an entrepreneur for 12 years? 12 years? Yeah, 12 years in various industries, sharing economy, e-learning. And then in 2017, my dad had a project so one of my businesses failed, moved back in with my parents, managed to get a job. He definitely felt sorry for me with my dad for some amount of time. And he had a project with the IOTA Foundation. And that's when I first discovered what blockchain was. And I was like, what the fuck? This is so crazy. So I started going to Crypto Chick Hackathon. I went to the first Crypto Chick Hackathon and then the second Crypto Chick Hackathon. And at that point, I have a degree in environmental sciences, nothing to do with blockchain or tech or anything. But I went back to university, learned how to code, and then won an Aave bounty at Hack Money 2020. Then co-founded a privacy play. We raised $3 million. That was wild. I learned a lot about ecosystem building, community, and anyone that's managed a Discord, I just feel so sorry for you. It's one of the most difficult, draining things to do in the world. Definitely experience burnout. And so that's kind of like my trajectory into crypto. And then I met, the Network State Protocol earlier this year, the group of awesome, crazy people. And we started looking at the lack of female participation in tech. And so what Her Nation is, and that's a project that I'm co-leading, is looking at how do we tap into the latent supply of female participation. And we're using the incentive mechanisms that blockchain has to offer with a commercial layer for women to start to engage with, what prompts, how does she tag, what parameters that could support AI in developing products and services and tooling for her.
Wow, there's quite a bit to unpack there. I'm fascinated by you deciding to go back to school and learn how to code. What motivated you to do that? Was it just your interest in blockchain and feeling like you needed to understand it more, or was there something deeper?
It really goes back to a lack of confidence, to be honest. Being in a room with people and not being able to understand how an API works or just the general language. I don't code anymore, really, but it gave me the confidence to be able to ask the questions to get to the answers I need to get to. I find people way smarter than me to code. But the reason I went back to school was definitely for confidence, just to be able to talk the same language and relate to people and start to understand the concepts and ideas. And I mean, it was hard. I was working full time, going to school 3-4 nights a week. I didn't have a social life, but now I get to do what I'm doing now, so it was great. I highly recommend it. If you're thinking about doing something like going back to school to learn how to code or whatever, just do it. You have way more time than you think you do.
Yeah, and I find that such an interesting problem for businesses in particular that want to or need a developer on board, when you don't have any knowledge in development, there can be quite a disconnect. Like there's an increased or like an extra layer of distrust because you don't really know how much it takes to like build the product or how long it takes. And so you question your developers every move because you're like, surely adding that button will take 2 seconds. But I feel like having like a basic understanding of how it all works and how long it takes to complete tasks is such a
Yeah,
useful tool because, I mean, everything's going digital really.
that's useful. And then also just if you have someone you can really trust, that, I mean, I find it wild how often it's how not how often, but how difficult it is to find people who with integrity who do what they say they're going to do on time. And why that's important with development. I mean it's with anything, but with development is you want the quality to be there. So as long as you have that, and then you have that second integrity piece, it makes all the difference when creating products and services, because that's feeds your marketing and feeds your calendar and then feeds your sales and feeds. So it's just like everything kind of comes back down to your team, I think, in the end, and finding the right people to build with.
Yeah.
Because not everybody has the answers. Like I definitely don't have all the answers. Like there's things I'm lacking for sure.
Well, I think we all are. But you
Oh, yeah.
mentioned that you're working on Her Nation, and it sounds extremely
Yeah.
interesting. Could you tell me a little bit more about it and why you've decided to start it?
Yeah. Okay. So it started with I met the um NSP group earlier this year. I was looking just for a job. I need money, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll just do some community development stuff and marketing. And when we met, Casey, we just got along really well, and he was like, oh, do you have a chip on your shoulder from like this failed thing and that failed thing? I'm like, totally. And he goes, great. You're perfect. This is exactly what we're looking for, because we have this idea. But, one of the things that he kind of noticed and he's standing for is, when you look at the statistics for like how many women, female projects get funded, it's gone down. It back down to like 2% of venture capital goes to female started projects. And he started telling me about his idea about the network state thesis, which is, are you familiar with that? It's Ology's network state thesis.
I
Okay.
know about it a bit, but could you please explain it?
Okay. So it's this, the premise or idea of the network state is, this is my language, is you find the right people, you look at history, and then you start to develop an inclusive state that you opt into by choice based on the Constitution, the preamble. So it's like, how we're born into, like, you've been born into England, I've been born into Canada. It's like, you kind of are given this preset constitution to live into and live by, your rights and also your duties and responsibilities. A network state, it looks at, okay, well, what's this network state up to? And then I would like to opt in. I would like to buy a passport. These are the kinds of benefits you get as a user. And it's looking at securing almost like a platform for collective action, but you can be anywhere in the world and it's all online. And then eventually, the goal is you buy a piece of land somewhere and you operate your network state IRL. So, I mean, like, that's like the big vision and the dream. But it just starts with getting having kind of a foundation or a cause worthy of that people find worthy of, to get together and get behind and start to produce results as a collective. And I'll go into that a little bit later around the governance. It's actually wild.
Yeah. I read through it and it is wild. I find network states so interesting because, well, the theory, in theory, it sounds super attractive, but like, have you come across any sort of problems? Actually, the problem I think of is the jump from online to IRL, because the governments we have boundaries and borders already. So how do you import a network state in real life into an
Can I
existing
tell you
country?
something?
And then
I'm gonna let NSP deal with that first, and I'm gonna follow suit. I'm like behind them. I'm totally just gonna copy. If it works, it works. I'm gonna learn from their mistakes. They're the guinea pig. I'm just following, and I'm just kind of like, because you're totally right. I have no idea. I mean, and that's what makes it kind of exciting. I have no idea what it's going to look like, how it's going to look, but it is, I think, the idea of having choice to opt into things. And maybe we won't get to the state where we have an IRL nation state, or, maybe it'll be a house somewhere, or like, I have no idea what it's going to look like. But the point is getting a group of people that get along enough that you can have a healthy amount of conflict, that you can start to solve problems together, that give you confidence, that call you out, that like start to have you create real value between one another. And maybe my network state, which is working on AI, will work with other network states to provide solutions for them, and they'll be able to provide solutions to my. But it's creating a little marketplace, or many economies that can start to integrate and interact with one another and provide each other with different benefits and different opportunities.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at, and I'm not in the IRL conversation yet.
Yeah, I'm jumping the gun a bit, but in terms of her nation, it seems to be very female focused. What inspired you to start Her Nation and focus on this problem?
Okay, so in the tech space, it's very male dominated. It's something like 26% of the tech space is female. I personally have been in one job specifically, where a male counterpart was making 30 or 40% more than me for doing the same work. And it's really frustrating when the output or quality or intent that you're bringing, or energy or whatever you're bringing to something, you're not receiving the same amount. Who knows? Maybe he just negotiated a better deal, but those kinds of things have happened in different contexts. And I am stubborn enough to take on a problem set like this to make a difference for it. And that's what kind of was my cause or reason or inspiration for working on this problem, because I want to change it. Also, like, the other thing is, you have a whole group of society, 52% of society, that's not activating, and there's specific use cases where you see tech is designed for her, and she activates like crazy. You look at Bumble and Tinder, for example. Bumble has more female users on it than Tinder, even though there's 58 million people that use Bumble and 75 million people that use Tinder. So just so you guys know, the Bumble was created by Whitney. She used to be on the Tinder team, but she created a kind of workflows and design that have her feel safe. Women message men first. It's just a different experience. And so when you start to look at that, and you start to look at how women hold 85% of the purchasing power of the world, meanwhile 85% of design and innovation happens by men, it's just, we design from our context. And so there's a massive opportunity if we can start to get the data and the workflows and the processes designed for a different user group, female user group.
Yeah, that's such an interesting statistic that you just mentioned. The 85% of women hold household purchasing power. It makes so much sense. They obviously call all the shots in the household, and yet the marketing doesn't reflect that, which is so strange. And yeah, it just shows that we have a lot of change still to happen, because I mean, it's also just from a purely financial marketing standpoint, like, why aren't you targeting your marketing to the people that are making the decisions? It just makes intuitive sense. So it's, yeah, I can see it. It is a big problem, and kudos to you for tackling such a huge problem.
Right, I got Brian's buy-in.
Yeah, you do. And So with Her Nation, what are the 4 pillars that you believe to be important for the success of Her Nation?
So we really looked at how to separate power in a way that has it be inclusive. If you look at, for example, Belgium and Sri Lanka, they got their independence around the same time. Sri Lanka did not separate power horizontally. So that would be like federally, provincially, municipal. Did you say municipally? Yeah, municipally.
Yeah, I think so.
And so they've been kind of, it's like, how does information flow? How does money flow? And Sri Lanka's been in not a great state politically for a very long time. Meanwhile, Belgium separated that. And so we spent a lot of time looking at how do you separate power in a way that not just dependent on who makes the most money or who has the most clout, but we can start to create an economy that serves the best interests of the communities and people participating in it. And so the 4 pillars that we separated are separation of identity. So with Her Nation, you get a passport. So imagine it's just like the passport that you have, and that passport grants you access to certain benefits on the platform, depending on which one you choose. Inside the identity stack, you have your username. You also are able to pull in your decentralized timeline and attach your domain name, ENS Unstoppable, your lens timeline. So that identity piece, it just provides a layer of accountability because you know who's in the room. And so that's like one of the foundational pieces that we have. You can crowdfund your passport. It's chain agnostic. I think we're on 14 or 15 chains. So we're really looking to provide as a super inclusive stack for all the pillars, but so that anyone can participate and your preferences are met. The next piece is information. And this one's really interesting to Her Nation because we're looking to, the idea is like, I'm going to assume that people listening to this, you have used ChatGPT. I want you to imagine on our platform, you can start to, we have an integration with OpenAI for now, but you can start to prompt and play with the tool. And our idea is to start to tag, we're working with Human Protocol as well, but start to tag data and change the parameters of existing LLMs or Stable Diffusion, for example, so that the outputs are more reflective of what caters to the female audience. People are able, because we have our own platform, women are also able to train their own bots and to interact with the platform so that we can start together to build that data, to build the repositories, and start to build the kind of intellectual capital that will support her in commercializing what's important to her. So that's kind of like the idea around the why for the information. We're also going to create knowledge bases. Those knowledge bases, like vision, would be like, imagine you're like a healthcare professional and you're like, oh, I need a statement of work for this kind of project, or I need an agreement because I'm hiring this kind of employee. We want to create repositories that allow for her to access whatever capital she needs to support her in the next step of creating whatever's important to her. So those repositories are libraries of information. So that's kind of where the other piece of information comes. The third pillar is money. So you have a self-custody wallet, so you own your private keys. You can use whatever kind of wallet. We're integrating with as many partners as possible, but you're really you own everything. We don't want to touch that. So that's where money comes into play. And then lastly, the governance. I actually kind of touched on that when I first started talking around the separation vertically between information, identity, and money, and then horizontally between federally, provincially, and municipally. So those would be like mini tribes that you can start to group together, and you have different access to. I'd have to show you on like a page. Go to. I'll send a link or somehow get you guys to this link, but you'll be able to see the framework for how we've laid out the separation of power inside of our governance stack.
Awesome. There's quite a bit to unpack there. I think I'd like to.
It's really intense.
I think I'd like to ask a few questions about each pillar. So for identity, why do you think public identity is important? Because I mean, we're used to, having anon trolls on X or Twitter, and they get a kick and sometimes even get big followings with no one knowing their name, but it also gives them the freedom to say whatever they want. So why is like public identity important?
Wait, you could still be anonymous. Like you could still like it's attached to your wallet, but like I'm not going to say, oh, you need to give me your exact. It's just that, look, if you're participating in the community and you're supporting, we want to be able to provide rewards for you. Or if you're not, we want to be able to just know who's in the room, so there's a layer of accountability. But we don't care who you are, like specifically.
Okay.
If that makes sense. Like being anonymous, go for it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, then that clarifies that. And in terms of information and training new models, what's the process? What goes into training new models? Because from my understanding, a lot of the current models that are publicly available for use, and especially the like text to image generation models, are very male dominant. So what goes into training a new model to make it more 50-50 or even more female focused?
Okay, wait. So first of all, I don't know if any of you guys have used Stable Diffusion or Midjourney, but like there's a lot of like bizarre hentai like women in those models. I'm like looking at this, I'm like, I don't look like this. I would never use this. So there's that's actually the first thing that we're going to be tackling. But how we're doing it is a little bit more. We need to build our use cases, and so we're creating a almost 3-sided marketplace where, and this comes in to the token use cases as well, where you have artists on the one hand, photographers who come in and give their photos, give their designs, give their templates for socials or creative briefs or email newsletters or whatever, kind of like almost like the Canva kind of templates that you can access. This is our first use case. And then you have the people who are willing to train to go like, hey, looking for this, looking for that. And the artists on the other hand have tagged that information. And that's how you earn rewards. And then you have the AI scientists on the third side who are responsible for creating the parameters. So, I mean, we don't have an output yet. We've been developing this for about 3 months, starting to get the team together, and we have a strategy and we have a distribution strategy. But I can't tell you what it's going to look like exactly in terms of, we definitely can't create Stable Diffusion model at the beginning. That would take 4 to 6 months, probably, of intensive work with a quite a big team. What we can do is create a small version of that and test it and just make sure that it's useful for a cohort of users. So that's where we are now. I'm talking to World of Women and starting to get that use case ready to go to market. If you're a woman and you're listening to this and you find it interesting, get to me. So that's where we're at.
Quick interruption from me. The podcast is starting to gain traction, which is amazing, and thank you so much for the support. If I could ask you to do one little thing, could you please rate this podcast on whichever podcast platform you listen on? That little action goes a lot further than you think and would really help the podcast grow. Thanks in advance. I really appreciate it. Back to the episode. That's so interesting, and I don't have a lot of knowledge on like training LLMs and AI training. Like, how much data is necessary to have a sufficient model?
Oh my God. No, insane. They're called large language models. They're trained on so many patterns, so many sequences, so much data. And if you're talking about Meta, Google, Like these groups are massive. Like we're not going to do that right now. What we are going to do is look at what models are in existence and look at the data. So when we look at bias in AI, there's two things that Her Nation is focused on. So one is the actual data. A lot of the data that exists in the world right now is very male focused. We only test on male lab rats. My phone, too big for my hand. There's this whole concept of like pink it and shrink it. Shoes, they're made for men, and then you just make them smaller for women. So all of that data that exists online is very skewed to one gender. And a lot of the reasons from just a human aspect of that is women are spending a lot of time taking care of kids. They're spending a lot of time taking care of the elderly. And so they just don't have the time to be able to, they just haven't had the time historically. So data is the one thing. The second thing that's causing the bias in AI from our perspective is that the LLMs that are the parameters, how the model is created, has been predominantly created by male. In 2021, there's like the number of PhD students that are male were 79% versus female. So there's just a massive discrepancy. And so what we're going to start with, how do we create small use cases to train models and to have the right data for those models to target her. Also with our platform, we've got a commercial layer to be able to do things like create events, create socials. And so we're just in the middle of picking which the use cases those are. Are those going to be for fashion? Is it going to be for healthcare? And then we're going to go from there. The other idea that we're actually playing with is to have like a data DAO. The problem is those can take a long time to kind of get up and running. So we're talking to Human Protocol right now on that they do. Do you know Human Protocol?
I've heard of them, but could you explain what they are?
Yeah, distributed work. They have 700,000 of a distributed workforce, and they've made it super transparent for almost kind of similar to like a bounty program, but they're just awesome. Like how they've done what they've done, and their engine and the work that they're doing is phenomenal. And they are working on AI projects on tagging. So we're working with them to kind of create the boundaries and scope of our first output.
Wow, fantastic. And I can imagine, well, because big companies like Google and Facebook have access to so much data, and I guess it's also a question of whether all that data is like ethically sourced or not. But I can see that being a huge challenge, like ethically sourcing content and the creators giving you the rights to use that content.
I mean, that's a big problem. Everyone's talking about it. You go into Hugging Face Discord, you go into, all groups are kind of dealing with that. I mean, one of the concerns that I have is what happens if an artist just says that it's their work and it's not. There's going to be tons of issues that I can wait. I can wait to solve. But the thing is it's going in this direction anyways. We've open sourced so many AI tool sets and tooling. So if it's going this direction anyways, we're like, nope, we're creating a representative, biased tool set towards the feminine to deal with offsetting what's happening with the masculine. And I don't know what we're going to create. I do know that there's massive market opportunity. I know that it's needed. And now I'm just like, how do we get to the right people to have this, the use, and the right people to have the right use cases and have this work?
Yeah. And the question that comes to mind with regards to the third pillar and money is, could you explain what permissionless commerce is and what self-custody wallets are a bit more?
Yeah. So permissionless commerce for us is just the ability it's open source versus closed source as an ideology. The ability to sell whatever you want to sell. We are integrating with Wix. We're looking at Shopify. We have Eventbrite, an Eventbrite plugin. So the tech has been built over the last 3 or 4 years. Her nation's network state is using that tech to commercialize its products and services, and also we have the ability to collect data because of this platform. So the permissionless commerce piece exists throughout the NSP frameworks, and then we're just leveraging it for our use case, which is what makes this a network case. Like, this is like, our constitution is different than other people's constitution. And so, yeah, so permissionless commerce, getting back to your question, is just sell whatever you want. That's it.
Right.
And also, the other thing is we're also like multi-chain, super agnostic. So that's, I think, the other piece. We're really trying to be inclusive, which means that we're not exclusive.
Yeah, I think that's also very important. And with regards to the governance side of things and creating a constitution for this network state, where do you begin? How do you pick what bits to include? What makes good governance? I feel like there's so much to unpack there, and like there's bits you can pull from like states and governments and even online network states that do things well, and then there's stuff that you should exclude.
Well, Casey spent so much time working on, like, he read so many constitutions, and we looked at things like what happens when you don't separate church and state. You see what's happening with the abortion laws in the States right now. And lucky for me, I have a sister that's a constitutional lawyer.
Very lucky.
So I'm just riding off of her, what do you call coattails, I guess? Like, is that, can I say that? Riding off of her coattails? But she's, so she's definitely helped me a lot in terms of, after the apartheid and what happened in South Africa, she said, spend some time looking at that constitution, because they really took the time to make sure that what happened there doesn't happen again. So, and that's one of the other key pieces of Balaji's network state thesis, which is around looking at the historical context of what's happened in the past, so that we can change whatever that pattern was and create anew, so we don't make the same mistakes. And I mean, there might be, maybe I'll find out, or we'll find out, if someone from listening to this call will go look at our constitution and our preamble and go, no, this isn't doing this right. We definitely need it's like, when you create a social network, it's like, how do you have healthy conflict? You go onto Facebook, and people get, in the town that I'm in, people are here from all walks of life. You have Israelis, you have Argentinians, you have people from Spain, you have Canadians, you have Americans. And so you get all these people into a small ecosystem, and they have different views about addressing problems, and they're just fighting in these groups. And it's like mayhem, and it's like, it's awful, but it's also exciting. But that stays in the URL scene most of the time. So it's not like, nothing gets too crazy, but online it does. And I think having a place to voice your opinions, and that's why for us, having that legislature piece where we get to decide, like, what's actually important for us to build, what capital do we want. One of the pieces that we're looking at building right now is a bot that allows for, the way that women fundraise is different than the way that there's like a translation almost issue. And one of the women advising on the project right now is helping us with all the information, so that we can build a product that supports the females that she's helping fundraise, so that they can access the people, access the information, and access capital that they need to build whatever is important to them. And she's got a 75% success rate, and she's awesome. But these are the kinds of things the use cases that we're looking for.
Yeah. Wow. So the governance, it just sounds so complicated.
It's crazy. It is, but it's not. We kind of figured it out on the way. I want to share one thing. You didn't really, it's not that you didn't ask, but I want to share something, because also you were mentioning earlier that some of your audience are people that are like, on the edge of starting maybe something or creating something. And something that's really special about what we're building for me is that I found a team where culturally we can have tough conversations, and we can fight and we can celebrate and we're ourselves. And so all of that pretense that you normally have when you're in a work environment is not there. And we get through problem solving a lot quicker. And that makes for me, that makes the governance easy. And the way that this network state has been created the same way that the network state thesis has been created, around find your people, create your mission together, separate your duties, responsibilities, and start to be the thing that you promised with integrity. And so that's been really fundamental, I think. It's like, you don't just go create a baby with someone that you don't know. I mean, that happens, from time to time, but like usually
Yeah.
it's kind of like you meet the person and then you go and you create, and it's like meet the right group of people. And I say and like a lot, and when I present, I might have said it a lot on this call. And I was pitching, and one of my co-founders, I get a list of like dots, and I'm looking at this message afterwards. I'm like, what is this? And he said, oh, that's the number of times you said or like on the call in the first minute. And I was like, oh no, no. But like, that's like, hey, I have your back, and also you need to fix this. So
Yeah.
it's like just cultural fit.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that was actually one of the reasons why I started this podcast, was because I was saying too many times, and watching myself back was so cringe. I just couldn't believe how many times I said it. And also, like, my response to questions, I kept saying awesome all the time. And I was just like driving myself crazy. And I sit there looking at myself for a whole hour and I'm like, oh, you idiot. But it's so helpful because I'm now conscious of it and working on it. But what you're saying about your team, and it's almost acting as like a proof of concept for what you're all building. And it's validating that it works. And so that must be really motivating to like keep going, because it works in like the smaller microcosm of your workplace.
It's exactly what is so motivating. I'll be out at like a social event, and then I'll have an idea because I'm excited, or I'll meet someone, and I'm on Slack messaging. It's like it's become really such a big part of my life, and these are people that for me they're gonna be in my life, I think, for a very long time. So that's been it's awesome. To that feeling of belonging is fucking cool.
Yeah, that it is cool. And so the whole project of Her Nation is all tied together with a token, but I know there's like a blockchain like discussion at the moment about the purpose of a token and sometimes whether it's necessary or not. So I was wondering, what is the purpose of the token? What purpose does it serve?
For our token is very utility driven. Because of the governance structure that we have, like I don't know. When I was first looking at how we're creating our token, I'm like, this be as big as the Curve Wars? I don't know, but the point is like the governance piece is really giving you choice on where to allocate resources to build the products and services that we build on the platform for the end user. That governance piece adds a lot of utility, the ability to, when you're, for example, training a bot to earn for giving a thumbs up or thumbs down to answers, or for tagging, is another piece. And that's just in the kind of realm of like the build and the governance. Outside of that, we have, when we start to build these models out, and users are just like OpenAI or ChatGPT or Stable Diffusion, we're going to use the Her token for compute power. So you get a subscription to access all the resources that we as a community have developed, to access the bots that, someone can create a bot and create their own repository and their own knowledge base for the bot to access, and charge like, it's $5 a month for you to access all the information that I've curated. So That's another one. And then, because of the platform, we have a sick event stack. So anything from you want to charge 10 whatever, $10, 10 ETH. That would be a really, really expensive event. um, you, you can. There's also a use case for our token there. So there's many different use cases. And as our network state grows and develops, and we start to create partnerships with other network states, we have Burger Nations, we have Vinyl Nations, they're launching something like 10 or 12 nations in the next 3 months.
Oh, wow.
So we're going to create little mini partnerships. They're festival nations. So we're doing so much that's so different that when you cross-sect those, the token's going to have more clout. And my job is to make sure that the token earns more market share. So I'm going to be competing also with all of these network states, and I'm going to win. We're going to win, not me. We're going to win.
I'm sure you will. That's so interesting, and that makes perfect sense. It is necessary for a token like that because like you mentioned, the OpenAI and Stable Diffusion, where even though you pay with a credit card, it still works on a token-based system. Particularly when you're working with like fractions of a fraction of a cent and stuff, the token model just makes sense.
Exactly. It's also such a good incentive model to layer. Like I'm thinking of things like, Hugging Face doesn't really have a commercial layer, for example, for like it's the build of its models. Sure, it's open source, but like what if you could start to have discussions and earn, and the transaction piece of that was just sorted. So these are the kinds of opportunities that we're looking at. So
yeah, definitely. And what is the total addressable market for your product?
Half the world. And then you have to take into consideration there's a large number of women that don't have access to the internet. I have the numbers, I'm not remembering them right now, but the women that we're looking to first kind of engage with are women who have a business, women that have questions about how they can increase their... Look, the thing is if women don't start participating with AI, they're not using prompts, they're not getting involved, AI provides the opportunity of delivering things cheaper, faster, and more efficiently. And so on the way to having her build her capital and grow her business, that's really the group that we're targeting first. So women that own businesses. Then there's the other side of the market, which is artists who want to earn for their creations. And then there's the other side, which is the female AI scientist. But that kind of we've got coverage for now. But if you are a female AI scientist, get to me.
And is it exclusively for females, or could males join too?
No, for sure. It's inclusive. We're more so just building. We just see a massive opportunity and a massive missing, and that's like, I happen to be a woman, and I happen to be able to make a difference for this with this cause, and like we want to make money. Like the only way, like sure, this is an impact-driven project in many ways, but for us to actually be successful in what we're doing, we need capital, and we need to be able to deploy that capital in a smart, efficient way. And that's why we're building what we're building. How do we deploy capital so that we further grow and start to serve that 85% better?
It's it just keeps popping into my head that this is like such a interesting and large problem that needs addressing. And have you, not only referring to Her Nation, but just in general, have you had any fears about starting any businesses? And if so, how did you overcome those fears?
Yeah, I have fears. I have fears even like, am I doing the right thing? Is this the best use of my time? Am I going to have money in 6 months? Like I have all of that stuff going on. And it can be really paralyzing. the thing that I think's happened over the last 10 years is I've just gotten two things. One, I've gotten better at bouncing back, kind of like instead of, the conversations that I have about like, oh, I failed and why did this happen? That's just, I'm getting to that faster. So I'm bouncing back faster. And then through all that failure, I just gotten more experience in what not to do. And, but yeah, I have fear. Of course, I totally have fear about, mostly how I'm spending my time and, if am I doing it right? Is it going to work? And then I just have to calm down, get on the call, have this conversation, call this person, get into action.
Yeah, I think failure is such an important part of like learning, but many people are so afraid of it that they don't even start the process in the first place. Do you think entrepreneurship is learned or inherent in someone?
I think it goes back to having people around you that stand for you when you're not standing for yourself. There's a really good analogy I heard. Actually, Martin Luther King wasn't supposed to give his speech on Parliament Hill the day that he gave his I Have a Dream speech. And Mahalia Jackson was a good friend of him. She's a famous singer. And he started apparently doing, this is something I've heard, I actually haven't researched it, but this is, he started giving a different speech because he was told by the White House that he wasn't allowed to give the I Have a Dream speech. So he started giving a different speech. And then apparently you can hear in the recording, Mahalia Jackson goes, Martin, tell them about your dream. And she just kept yelling at him until he stopped, switched, started. I have his dream. So, I mean, I guess I think it's learned, but it's like having the people in your corner. My parents have been massively supportive. I've moved back in twice, completely broke, 29, at 26. And then, yeah. So I don't know if that's, get the right people around you.
I think, yeah, that is a valuable lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so important. And do you think their support played a big role in giving you the confidence to like get up and keep going?
Yeah, I think it really did. The thing that's really interesting, I'm going to share something a little personal now, is that there was a time I got into an argument with them, and my parents, they're like financially they're fine, and we got into an argument, and I wasn't talking to them for about 2 or 3 months, which is rare because we're really close. But during that time, I had no money, and I had too much pride to ask them to borrow some. So I was living in Costa Rica, and I went to a horse farm, friend's horse farm. I lived in a shack, and I was shoveling horse shit to pay for my rent. And during that time, I started 2 businesses, and one of them was the one that I raised $3 million for. And I think it was one of the most stressful times because there were so many unknowns about like money and my future, but they both did okay. And I think you got to be willing to go down there because your brain kicks into some crazy survival shit. Like I was, and that's now where I have gotten my confidence from. So the support was great. And then I guess maybe in the end, I just needed to kind of sit with myself and go through the confrontation of my own survival.
Yeah, that is so interesting. Jessa, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking the time. How can people find out more about Her Nation and what you guys are working on?
That's great. You can go to hernation.ai and on Twitter. Our Twitter is at her. Oh my God, is it at her AI _? God, I'm a bad founder. First of all, I'm a bad founder. Second of all, just find I'll send you links. Maybe
I'll put
you
it in
can
the show
that
notes. I'll
somewhere.
put it in the show notes.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for joining me, Jessa. It was a fantastic conversation, and enjoy your next call. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate you making it all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed the episode. One more quick reminder before you go. I have a weekly newsletter by the same name, Another Excuse, where I cover 4 topics: something that has changed my perception, a tool that could be useful to you, content that is actually worth consuming, and a concept that I try break down and explain. If this sounds of any interest to you and you need a kick up the arse, then you can subscribe at the link below. Thanks for joining me again, and I'll see you next week.